What's up guys, Kit Dale here. Have you ever practiced a move over and over again only to forget it later on? This may have something to do with the way you set your training out. I want to cover two things today. Blocked versus randomized training, and I want to give you a few tips on how to improve your declarative memory. First of all, practice performance, retention performance. Two different things. Practice performance is your ability to improve during training. Okay, so if you've got a new technique, it would be your ability to improve during that session. Retention performance is how much information you retain over a long period of time. So you can see there's a big difference. There's no point of getting really good during practice only to forget everything you learned later on. Okay, especially for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and other sports, you want to have long-term memory retention. That is the goal. Okay, but they are two completely different things. This is for motor functions, okay? There's not so much for declarative memory, but more for your performance during sport. I've got a few graphs here, okay? And these are graphs taken from different case studies testing randomized training compared to block training. If you're wondering what the difference is, block training is when you repeat a movement over and over and over again, the same movement from the same position over and over again, like high repetition training. In golf, you'll see this if the guy was shooting from a driving range for the same target, or he was putting from the same distance every single time, the same angle. In Jiu-Jitsu, it would be high repetition drilling. Randomized training is quite different. Randomized training is doing different things every single time, okay? So in golf, you would be putting different balls from different areas every single time, or shooting at different targets every single time. In Jiu-Jitsu, it would be practicing different moves all the time, or what I call specific training, which is live training in a controlled environment where you don't practice the same thing over and over again. Okay, which is the freedom to think about it a bit more. Now, in these case studies, we had one from baseball, one from a series of arm movements, and one from basketball. I'm not going to get into the details of it because you can find that yourself if you want. I can send you the link and you can go do your own homework on that. But I want to give you the results, okay? The results are interesting. After every single one of these practices, the test they did a test directly after from the exact same position the blocked trainers practiced from. Okay, so you can imagine the blocked trainers have a huge advantage. Then they tested them later on in the weeks to come. Okay, the first one here, the blocked representing the blue, you can see the first couple tests, they were higher. Same with the series of arm movements, they were higher here. This is actually switched around on its head. And you can see here, slightly higher. But the interesting thing is, when they tested them later on, what happened was the massed and randomized training, the randomized training, kept excelling up. But the blocked had huge declines in memory retention. So what they figured was that randomized training is much better for long-term memory retention. If you do the same thing over and over and over again, your brain doesn't really register it that well in your long-term memory. And there's technical reasons for this, and I'm not going to go into that at the moment. That'll be more in my product. But randomized training benefits long-term retention by a long shot. By 40% here, by 56% here, and by a large amount there. Now, this is interesting, and also another interesting case study, which I haven't got here, but I've got the results for, was this was to do with spaced and mass training, which is similar. Spaced training is just when you separate training into different areas and you interweave it, you keep coming back to it, okay? Where mass training is where you focus on the one subject for a long period of time. They were shown different bits of art from different artists. In the massed section, they were shown 6 different paintings from one artist. Then they were shown 6 different paintings from another artist, and so forth. In the spaced, they were shown 1 painting from one artist, another painting from another artist, another painting from another artist, and what they would do was cycle back through them, okay? So it was spaced or interweaved. Now, afterwards, they tested, and the spaced training had much better results, which is understandable when you look at the way this worked. But the interesting thing was, 83% of the participants believed that they got better results from massed training, when 85% of them actually did better in spaced training. So the interesting thing here is, even though they had much worse results, their perception was that they got better results from mass training. And that's why you can understand where a lot of people do blocked training and mass training, high repetition drills, because they can feel that slight improvement during the practice performance stage. But what they don't realize is that there's a huge fall in memory retention, because that's hard to quantify. Only through case studies can you figure that out. So you can understand why people feel that they get more of a benefit from that. So it's super interesting. So if you look at block training and what it kind of does, what is block training? It's the execution of a singular move, okay? Now, that's great, and it's good for motor functions, but it's 1/3 of the puzzle in which you want to practice. When we look at randomized training, we seem to cover 2 more areas. What are the other areas we cover? We cover a reading stage, okay? And we recover a selecting stage, then the execution as well. So we're doing 2 extra things. Now the reading and selecting stage are extremely important. What the reading stage is, it's where you evaluate the situation, okay? Because it's randomized, every single time you go to a new position, if you were doing basketball, I go to a new position, I need to evaluate the distance to the ring, and I need to evaluate the angle. In Jiu Jitsu, if I'm doing a different position, I need to evaluate the situation, the position that we're in, you know, and then I need to select a new move. In basketball, I select what type of, you know, how hard I throw it or whatnot. In Jiu Jitsu, I select what move I use, okay? So this huge, reading and selecting section does not exist in the block training, because it's a controlled environment where you do the same thing over and again, so you don't need to think, okay? You're just building procedural memory, which is muscle memory. You're not actually getting that other area, which, you know, is declarative as well. So it's really important to randomize your training. You know, you can see from the case study, if you're doing that kind of training, you need to work on something, make sure you randomize it, okay? Another thing, it's just a little tip to do with declarative memory and wanting to recall things. If we look at a deck of cards, okay, and I show you a deck of cards, there is a guy out there that can read that deck of cards for 21 seconds, 21.19 seconds, and he can tell you exactly what card comes after what card in the exact same order, okay? And that's after being shuffled. There is another guy that he could get 28 different decks shuffled randomly. He could spend an hour looking at them and then tell you each card after each card all the way through the 28 decks, which is incredible. And it's not that these guys have some amazing gift with memory. It's the technique they use, which I'm going to explain about a little bit at the moment, okay? To help explain that, I'm going to use this example here. I've got a word here, IFBACIRIS, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 letters. If I asked you to remember that, if you look at that for 5 seconds, and then I wipe it away and I ask you to remember it, would you be able to remember it? Most likely not. You might get a few letters right, but it'd be difficult because us as humans can only remember 5 to 9 bits of information, plus or minus 2, per moment, okay? So anything above that will be really hard to recollect, and it'll probably kind of confuse you. But it'll be difficult to read that, okay? And to be able to repeat that. But if I change these words around a little bit, and I just move them a little bit, I'm just going to change the way they are. Now, if you were to look at them, FBI, CIA, IRS, now you can look at that straight away and know exactly, memorize that exactly, because you create an association with them. You know FBI, you know CIA, and you know IRS, okay? Now, this is the amazing thing about memory, especially declarative memory, is that we remember by association and meaning more than the way we learnt it. It doesn't matter if you think you're a visual, kinesthetic, or audio learner. There's case studies showing that everyone learns the exact same way, regardless of what you think you are. The case studies have shown they've had 3 types of people do the tests, heaps of them. People that said they were audio, kinesthetic, and visual. And even though they told them their preferred way of learning, they scored the exact same amount in all different types of sensory tests. So it shows that even though you think you may be something, you still learn the exact same way, unless you're obviously deaf or something like that, or blind, of course. But it's pretty interesting. So we learn better by association. Now, what people do that's really interesting when they're trying to memorize things is they create a story or a meaning, okay? For example, there's one guy that he can run off a list of 20 things. If you give him 20 things in order and just tell him once and then get him to repeat it, he'll repeat exactly what numbers they are, okay? Because what he does is he creates an association with it. For example, he uses 1 as gun, okay? So if he's thinking about the number 1, he'll think gun. So if you've told him number 1 is a peacock. I hope I spelled that right. Okay, what he thinks is number 1 is a gun, because it rhymes with gun. Simple, okay? Peacock. He's going to visualize a gun shooting a peacock and feathers going everywhere, okay? And then maybe you say number 2 is a door. Okay, so he thinks number 2, shoe, rhymes, it's easy. So he's always going to associate 1 with gun, 2 with shoe, 3 with tree, 4 with door or whore, whatever you want. And whatever you choose, he'll create association, he'll play a story. So number 2 is a shoe, so he's going to think of a shoe and a door. Some way they're going to intertwine, and that's how he's going to create this big, vivid, like memory. And what happens is when you create this story in your head, you lock it down in your long-term memory retention, okay? Rather than just seeing a number. A number is pointless. A number is going to be forgotten in 30 seconds. But if you can create a story or a meaning that, you know, means something to you or you can associate with, you're going to understand. That's why when you're reading certain bits of information that you have no idea about, it can be so overwhelming. But then you see something that you can relate to and you're like, ah, just like that. And it makes sense. Okay, as I said, declarative memory is like a set of scaffolding. The more information you know, the more you can relate to certain areas, the easier it is to apply new information. And that's the same with, you know, everything. So it's really important when you are teaching, or if you are a student or a participant, to try and create associations with whatever you're learning. If you're in Jiu-Jitsu and you're learning a De La Riva move, try and create an association with that. Something that you can create a meaning or play a story in your head about that. That's why when I teach, I always try and explain the why, which I feel is more important than the how. Okay? The why. Give them a storyline, give them something to associate with, and they will retain that information a lot better. There is so much more information here. I really wanted to cover space versus mass training. I wanted to go over implicit memory, explicit memory, stuff like that. But it is extremely, you know, difficult to put that all in one video. That's a large bit of information, which I'm going to be covering in my product anyway. And I'm going to be covering in detail how I structure my training out and my students as well, and how you can do the same thing, or how I associate different techniques so I can remember them a lot better. But that'll be all covered in my product coming out. If you guys liked it, please share it for your friends and let me know what you think. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments. And make sure you subscribe to my website, www.kitdalebjj.com, where I'm going to have all my new products and my product launches from there, okay? So make sure you sign up for that. And please let me know what you think of this, sorry. Take it easy, guys.